Living in Manila, Philippines, or living in Bangkok, Thailand, which is better? Today I wanted to share my personal experience, things that I have gained during my time living in both cities. I'm not here to judge, I'm not here to hammer a city for certain things that it's not good at. No, it's just really about my personal experience so that you can get useful information and really make a decision on your own whether you want to move to Manila or Bangkok. Let's get started with the cost of living. It's a very important subject. First up, Bangkok. I would say the cost of living in Bangkok is very low compared to a lot of other capitals in the region, especially when it comes to the price performance, to the value, because it's not just about how much you pay. You can pay very little for something and get very little value, or you can pay very little for something and get better value, or you can pay a lot for something and still get little value. I personally have found that Bangkok offers good value for your money. It's maybe not as good as Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in certain aspects, especially real estate, but I would say Bangkok, Thailand offers great value. If you take a look at food, if you want to eat out in Bangkok, Thailand, you can go to night markets, you can go to food courts, you can go to shopping malls. You can find pretty much anything. You can pay $20 or $30 for a lunch or dinner for just one person, or you can pay as little as $2 to $5. It really depends on where you eat and whether you want something fancy, do you want something cheap, But if you're on a tight budget, right? Let's say you only want to spend like $1,000 a month, including rent. If you're on a tight budget, if you want to live on little money in Bangkok, Thailand, then you can achieve that by just going to food courts, night markets, street food, you can take away food. You're probably not going to spend more than $5 to $7 a day on food unless you have a huge appetite, right? Or like I said, unless you want to eat at fancier places. Do you have a larger budget of, let's say, $2,000, you can go out to eat at shopping malls, you can eat at fancier restaurants, and you will not find it very difficult to spend $300 to $500 a month on food, just dining out. And that's what a lot of foreigners do. When it comes to apartments, right, it's something I wanted to mention here. Most foreigners live in Sukhumvit. That's where most people live. The people that vacation, they usually stay in Sukhumvit or in one of the southern areas too. People say Sukhumvit is the most thrilling area of whole Bangkok. It's where all the magic happens, it's where all the tourists are, where the nightclubs are. They are all over the place anyway, but there's a lot just specifically designed for foreigners. If you want to live comfortably in Sukhumvit, if you want to have a nice apartment, you can find a studio one-bedroom apartment, a fully furnished studio one-bedroom apartment for, I want to say, starting maybe $400 to $500. That would probably be the lower end, but you can also pay as much as $700 or $800 depending on the location, depending on the view, depending on whether it's fully furnished, depending on what amenities it has. Does it have a gym? Does it have a pool? Most places are going to have a gym. Not all places are going to have a pool, right? So if you stay in like a smaller apartment building, smaller complex, they may or may not have a pool. That's something to consider. If you want a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, you can easily pay, I want to say $600 to $700. I think that would be the minimum, but you can also pay as much as like $1,000 to $1,300, $1,500. If you want really something at the higher end, if you want the fanciest of the fanciest, then you can pay a lot more than that too. So it really depends. Let's talk about the cost of living in Manila. The first thing I wanted to bring up is, of course, renting in Manila. Now, when you say Manila, people are talking about Manila City, which does not include Makati, does not include Muntinlupa, does not include Angeles. That's a city up north. It's like a couple-hour drive. Now, when we're talking about Manila City, it's just Manila City. But the urban area of Manila has a population of, I think, 13 or 15 million people, and most foreigners live in Makati. That's the fanciest area in Manila. That's where you have the nice condos, that's where you have the great restaurants, that's where you have a lot going on. Renting in Makati is definitely more expensive than renting in Sukhumvit. If you want to have the same apartment that you have in Bangkok for, say, $400 or $500, you can expect to pay possibly $600 to $700 for the same apartment in Makati. That's just how it is. There's a lot more volume of high quality properties in Bangkok than there is in Manila. I mean, if you want to have a nice apartment in Manila, you want to go to the other area where it's going to be cheaper. If you want to pay less and still have a good apartment, then you want to move to some of the other areas, like Paranaque or Pasay. You know, that's going to be a little bit longer if you want to get to the city, if you want to go to Makati, if you want to go to the casinos. You know, it's going to be a little bit longer, but you're going to pay less. What about food in the Philippines? Because I think that's a very important question. Now, you have a lot of Japanese in Manila, and you have a lot of Koreans too, right? So you have a lot of Korean restaurants, you have a lot of Chinese restaurants. I think in Manila you have a lot of international cuisines, you have a lot of international people. There's a lot of Americans living in Manila. You know, the Philippines and Vietnam are, I think, the top 2 countries for Americans in Asia. I'm not so sure about Japan, haven't really looked into that, but there's definitely more Americans in the Philippines than there is in Thailand. When it comes to food, a lot of people don't like the local food in the Philippines, you know, because it's very protein rich, you know, it's grilled pork, it's grilled chicken, and you get rice. So a lot of people in the Philippines, they eat foreign food. What I've personally found is that the food in the Philippines is actually really good when you go to a beach. You know, I've been to Boracay, I've been to a couple places in Cebu, I've been to Malabasco, Mualboal, and the food there was definitely good, you know, and I would say even better than in Manila. In Bangkok, you know, the food is good everywhere. You know, you have local food, you have Thai food everywhere, and people love Thai food. And when people come to the Philippines, they're sometimes a little bit disappointed because they don't really have the same selection of food, you know, unless they decide to go with foreign cuisines. And that's what a lot of people end up doing anyway. Internet is another thing that I wanted to throw in here. The internet in Bangkok is good for the most part. You're not going to have a problem. You know, Bangkok has really good internet, and if you're in an apartment, you know, you can pretty much get internet from any provider. Shouldn't be a problem to have a high-speed connection. If you would live somewhere else in Thailand, probably going to be a little bit more difficult, especially should you be living on one of the islands. That's when it can get a little bit unstable. Now, in Manila, the internet is generally better than in most other parts of the island. You know, it's just the best infrastructure. It has the best setup. It's not so conducive to typhoons, you know, like it is in Cebu. You know, they have a lot of problems there, or just had a lot of problems. But in Manila, I'd say the internet is pretty good. And that's especially true for Makati. Let's talk about dating. It's a very important subject. What about dating in the Philippines? A lot of foreigners move to the Philippines because dating is just as good as it gets. And what I mean by that is that Filipinos speak English, you know. It is actually the local language, you know, yeah, you have Filipino and you have so many different other languages, but Filipinos learn English from an early age on. You know, there's very few people in the Philippines that don't speak any English at all. When we compare this to Thailand, Thailand is a place, if you want to live in Thailand for the long term, if you want to live in Bangkok for the long term, you do need to learn Thai. I haven't met a lot of Thai women that spoke English fluently. There are some, especially the ones that studied abroad or that went to better universities in Thailand or that had relationships with foreigners. Of course, there are exceptions, but the average person, you know, the skill level, the language skill level of the average Thai is definitely below the skill level of the average Filipino. That's something that's really important. Yeah, it's not just about cultural differences, which you encounter in both places anyway. Even though in the Philippines you have Catholic, you know, Filipinos are Catholics. In Thailand, they're Buddhists, right? So in Thailand, you're going to be struggling with the cultural differences. They're going to be more prominent than they're going to be in the Philippines. Plus, in Thailand, you're going to struggle more with language barrier. Like I said, there are exceptions, and there is a good amount of women that still speak English, but you're never going to have the same selection as you have in the Philippines. What about the community? That's really important. If you are a digital nomad, if you are some kind of a tech entrepreneur, if you're a high net worth individual, an expatriate, it doesn't matter who you are, you need a community. I mean, at least a lot of people do. Not everybody does, but a lot of people would like to meet up with like-minded individuals. How does that look like in Bangkok, Thailand? Well, Bangkok, and specifically Thailand, is among the top countries for digital nomads. It's among the top countries for expatriates. If you want to go to Thailand and if you want to stay in Bangkok, you know, you're not going to have a problem. There's no shortage of foreigners in Bangkok. There's a ton of co-working spaces where digital nomads, tech people, you know, coders, people that run online businesses. That's where they go to. That's where they meet other like-minded individuals. It's not going to be a problem. They're all over the place in Bangkok. And one of the things I've also gotten to appreciate about Bangkok is the amount of meetups available. All you need to do is just install the Meetup app, and you're going to have a bunch of meetups available, be it sports, be it masterminds, be it business-related things, playing an instrument. You have so many different meetup groups in Bangkok, that I haven't really found in many other cities in Asia. We take a look at the Philippines. That's actually really important. Who actually moves to the Philippines? I would say the majority of people that move to the Philippines, now we're talking about Makati. There's a lot of business people there. There's a lot of people that, have like outsourcing firms that work with virtual assistants. They hire Filipinos, Filipinas, and they are pretty much there in Makati. They're there in Manila. It doesn't just need to be Makati, but they're there in Manila. Yeah, there's a lot of them also in Cebu, but Manila is definitely the prime spot for people that are running some kind of an online business, that are hiring people from the Philippines and that are living in the Philippines permanently. When it comes to the digital nomad community, it is there. There is definitely a good amount of co-working spaces in Manila City, in Makati, and the other areas, but it's not as much as it is in Thailand. Thailand has a lot more. Thailand is the first country people go to when they come to Southeast Asia. Then they eventually go to like Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, they go to Bali, then they go to the Philippines, but Thailand is really the #1 visited country in Southeast Asia. What about the visa situation? Super important question, because you need to find a way how you can stay in the country for the long term. Taking a look at the Philippines. The Philippines has a very liberal visa policy, and it's a really liberal tourist visa. If you want to go to the Philippines, you want to remain in the Philippines for the long term, you can go there as a regular tourist, you get 30 days upon arrival, and then your visa can be extended in increments, of up to 60 to 90 days, and for a total of up to 3 years, 36 months. This is a very generous visa policy. The Philippines doesn't really ask for a whole lot, and it's one of the visas, or it's probably the main visa that people pick up who want to live in the Philippines and who don't want to, put down money to get a residence permit, who don't want to get married, who don't want to start a company, don't want to go to school. They don't want to get involved with anything other than this visa, because it's the easiest to get. It does require a little bit of work, because you do need to go to immigration every 2 months and extend your visa. There's obviously a fee to pay. But other than that, it's pretty easy for you to remain in the country. And you could even pay somebody, like an immigration agent, some kind of a visa agent, to go to the immigration on your behalf. What about the visa situation in Thailand? If you lived in Thailand, 7-10 years ago, you were able to leave the country for a day or two, come right back in, and you were given another 30 days. And that's what a lot of people did. It's called visa runs, to do a visa run. Nowadays, this is practically impossible, because Thai immigration really cut down on people who were doing that, on people who were living in the country, as a tourist, where in reality they should have just gotten some kind of a long-term visa. Things look very differently now. If you want to be a perpetual traveler, a perpetual tourist in Thailand, meaning somebody who wants to remain in Thailand for a couple months, couple years, then what you can do is you can apply for a long-term tourist visa, maybe not a long-term, but a mid-term tourist visa, which would give you 6 months in the country. You could apply for it at the embassy in your home country. There would be one way for you to remain in Thailand for the long term, and you can go to nearby countries, and then come back in. There would be an option for you. Or you can just go with the Thai Elite visa. The Thai Elite visa is specifically designed for perpetual tourists, perpetual travelers who want to live in Thailand for a couple of years at a time maybe, but not having to leave the country. With the Thai Elite Easy Access visa, you can achieve exactly that. The only downside is the price tag. It's pretty pricey. It is 600,000 Thai baht, which comes down to roughly $18,000, and that would be the amount that you need to pay if you want to remain in Thailand for 5 years. There's also the Thai Superior Extension, which gives you 20 years in Thailand, and it costs about $32,000. But living in Thailand as a perpetual tourist on just the regular tourist visa that you get when you come in is no longer an option. Do you want to live in Manila or Bangkok? What is your experience? Have you lived in any of these cities? Leave a comment below and let us know. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm uploading new videos on digital nomad locations, travel updates, and visas several times a week right now. I highly recommend that you grab a free copy of my ebook Nomad Elite, The Insider's Guide to Retaining a Life of Freedom. All you need to do is click on the link below the video. And if you got some more time left, check out these videos. Thank you for watching.